By the time Clara Whitmore was forced into the bridal chamber, 3 noble women had already fled from Duke Adrian Blackthorne, and each had carried away a different version of the same terror. The first had run barefoot through the western corridor before midnight, her veil torn from her hair and her feet leaving blood on the marble. The second had been found unconscious outside the chapel doors, clutching a rosary so tightly the beads had cut into her. The third had not screamed at all. She had left Blackthorne Hall in a closed carriage at dawn and for 2 days afterward. Whenever anyone asked what had happened, she only whispered one sentence: "There is something dead inside that room." After that, London gave Adrian Blackthorne a name that followed him everywhere: the cursed Duke. Mothers warned their daughters against him. Young ladies whispered his story behind painted fans. Even gentlemen who laughed at scandal lowered their voices when Blackthorne Hall was mentioned. For the old estate stood alone above the moors blackened by weather grief, and a fire no one in the family wished to explain. Clara had heard all of it from the kitchen. Servants always heard the truth first, or at least the shape of it. They heard which ladies cried behind locked doors, which gentlemen drank away fortunes, and which noble families smiled in public while sharpening knives beneath the table. Clara had learned long ago to listen without appearing to listen, because a maid who noticed too much could survive only if she also knew when to lower her eyes. She stood near the breakfast room doors with a silver teapot in her hands while Lady Mosseline Blackthorne spoke of her stepson's future as though she were mourning him before he was dead. "The council arrives tomorrow," Lady Mosseline said. "If Adrian remains unmarried by his birthday, they will have grounds to question whether he is fit to govern the estate. I have done everything a mother could do." She was not his mother. Adrian's true mother, Duchess Elena Blackthorne, had died 15 years earlier in the fire that destroyed part of the western wing. Lady Mosseline had come later, wrapped in black silk, careful pity, and gentle smiles that never reached the cold intelligence of her eyes. At the window, Duke Adrian Blackthorne stood with his back to the room. He did not defend himself. Not his height. Not the dark coat that sharpened the paleness of his face. Not even the shadows beneath his grey eyes. She noticed that when Lady Mosseline spoke of him as a tragedy, Adrian accepted it as though the sentence had already been written. Lord Cedric Vale, Lady Mosseline's son from her first marriage, leaned against the mantel with the lazy confidence of a man waiting for an inheritance to fall into his hands. "Perhaps we should stop calling it marriage," Cedric said. "It is beginning to sound more like an execution." A few people laughed nervously. The room fell silent. Before anyone could speak again, a pale footman entered and bowed. "Lady Amelia has gone, my lady. Her maid too. The Eastgate guard says a carriage left before dawn." For a moment, no one moved. Lady Amelia Fairford had been brought to Blackthorne Hall only the day before. The latest noble bride chosen to save the Duke's title and silence the council. By sunrise, she had chosen disgrace over spending one night as his wife. Lady Mosseline closed her eyes as if the news had wounded her. Clara saw no surprise on her face. The Duke had no bride. And before the breakfast plates were cleared, Lady Mosseline's sorrow had already become a plan. 3 hours later, Mrs. Wren, the old housekeeper, found Clara in the linen room and told her to come upstairs. They stopped before a small dressing chamber near Lady Mosseline's apartments. Inside, a wedding gown lay across a chair. Ivory silk, pearl buttons, lace sleeves fine enough to look like frost. Lady Mosseline stood beside it, studying Clara as one might study cloth before cutting it. "You are about Lady Amelia's height," she said. Clara's blood turned cold. "My lady, the ceremony must still take place. I am a maid. For tonight, you will be a bride." Mrs. Wren made a small sound, but Lady Mosseline ignored her. Clara forced herself to breathe evenly. His Grace no longer has the luxury of agreement. By tomorrow morning, the council will either find him married, or they will find him abandoned by another woman. "And if I refuse?" Lady Mosseline's smile did not move. "Then you will, of course, be free to leave Blackthorne Hall. Your brother's place at the charity school is tied to your employment here, is it not?" The threat struck exactly where it was intended. Thomas, 12 years old. Thin wrists. A boy who still believed books could open doors because Clara had spent years hiding how many. Doors had already closed. His place at that school was the only future she had managed to secure for him. And Lady Mousseline knew it. One night of obedience, Lady Mousseline said softly, "Your brother keeps his future. You keep your position. Perhaps you even earn enough to begin again somewhere kinder." Clara looked at the wedding gown, then back at the woman who had dressed cruelty in the language of mercy. "And if I do not survive the night?" For the first time, impatience flashed through Lady Mousseline's eyes. "If his grace frightens you, scream. If he behaves violently, run to the door. There will be witnesses nearby. In the morning, you need only tell the truth." "What truth?" "That no woman can remain with him." Before Clara could answer, the door opened. Duke Adrian Blackthorne stood on the threshold. "No," he said. The word was quiet, but the room seemed to shrink from it. Lady Mousseline turned with a sigh. "Adrian. No. You cannot afford pride tonight. This is not pride." Cedric appeared behind him in the corridor, smiling faintly. "Decency. A little late considering 3 brides have already fled your bedchamber." For one breath, Adrian looked dangerous enough to become every rumor ever told about him. Then his gaze moved to Clara, and the anger vanished beneath something colder and sadder. "They should not have dragged you into this," he said. It was the first time that day anyone had spoken of her as not a solution. Clara should have lowered her eyes. "Then do not let them make me disappear." The chapel was opened at dusk. There were no flowers, no music, and no guests smiling through tears. Lady Mousseline wore black lace, making the wedding feel less like a marriage than a funeral arranged in advance. Cedric watched from the side with folded arms. Clara wore Lady Amelia's gown. It did not fit properly. The lace scratched her wrists, and the pearls at the bodice were cold against her skin. Yet she walked to the altar without stumbling. Adrian stood there, pale and rigid. When she reached him, he did not look at the gown. He looked at her face. "I can still stop this," he whispered. "No," Clara whispered back. "You can still make it mean something different." Clara said them because refusing would ruin Thomas. Adrian said them as if each word cost him something he could never recover. When it was done, no one applauded. Only the storm answered, striking the chapel windows as if even heaven objected to what had been done. Lady Mousseline kissed Clara's cheek with cold lips. "My brave child," she murmured. "Try not to be afraid." The western chamber waited at the end of a corridor where the air itself seemed to change. "Mrs. Wren walked Clara halfway, then stopped near the bend. "Listen to me," the housekeeper whispered. "Do not drink anything inside that room. If His Grace speaks as though he is somewhere else, do not argue with what he sees. Give him something real. The floor. And if he calls for his mother." She stopped. Clara touched her hand. "What happened in that room?" "Mrs. Wren's eyes filled with tears she refused to shed. "Not in that room," she whispered. "Behind it." Then the footman arrived, and the moment was gone. The western chamber was grand, cold, and suffocating. Heavy velvet curtains covered the windows. Adrian stood near the far window and did not turn when Clara entered. The door closed behind her. Then came the sound she had expected and dreaded. A key turning from the outside. "Yes. You knew." "Yes. And you allowed it." "I have broken that door before," Adrian said. "They have reinforced it since." The simplicity of the answer chilled her more than rage would have. At last, Adrian turned. But his eyes were already fixed too sharply on the shadows near the hearth. "Stay near the door," he said. "When morning comes, tell them whatever keeps you safe." Clara looked toward the medicine. "Do you take that every night?" "Does it?" A pause. Outside, thunder rolled across the moor. It began quietly with a tightening around Adrian's mouth and one hand pressing against the window frame. Then thunder cracked again, closer this time, and the low fire snapped in the grate. Adrian turned violently toward it. And his face changed so completely that Clara felt fear rise in her throat. He was no longer seeing the room. "Mother," he whispered. That single word broke open the truth of him. He stumbled toward the hearth. Then recoiled from the flames as if they had leapt up his. His hand struck the table. The glass of medicine fell and shattered. Amber liquid spread across the rug, releasing a bitter smell into the air. Clara knew that scent. She had smelled something like it in the workhouse infirmary, when men were given too much sleep draught and woke trapped between dream and madness. Not poison meant to kill quickly. Something worse. Something meant to loosen the mind until memory became a prison. Adrian slammed his fist against the locked door. "She's inside," he gasped. "I can hear her." Clara's fear became very still. "Not gone." She stepped closer. "Your Grace." He did not hear her. "Adrian." His head turned. "You're not in a fire," Clara said. "The door beneath your hand is cold. Feel it." He pressed his palm against the wood, shaking. "Cold," she repeated. His voice broke. "She called and I left her." "No. You were a boy. I left her." He looked at her with such raw hatred for himself that she almost stepped back. Almost. Instead, Clara knelt a few feet away. "What was her name?" His breath caught. "Then listen to me, Adrian Blackthorne. Elena is not behind that door tonight. But you are in front of it. And if your mother loved you, she would not want you to burn with her every time it storms." The words struck him harder than comfort. For a moment he stared at her as if she had spoken a language he had forgotten. Then the Duke of Blackthorne sank to his knees beside the locked door and began to weep. Not loudly. He wept like a man who had held a burning house inside his chest for 15 years. And had finally found one person who did not mistake the smoke for evil. Clara moved closer. This time when she placed her hand over his, he did not pull away. The storm dragged itself slowly east. The candles burned lower. They remained beside the door, her hand over his, the spilled medicine drying dark on the rug. Near dawn. Adrian looked at her with the stunned horror of a man returning to himself and finding a witness still there. "Why did you not run?" he asked. Clara looked at the shattered glass, the locked door, the low harmless fire, and the man who had almost been destroyed by memory. "Because monsters do not cry for their mothers in the dark," she said. For a long moment he could not answer. Then footsteps gathered in the corridor. Keys rattled. Lady Mosseline had come to collect the ruin she expected to find. The door opened. She stood outside with Cedric the physician, Mrs. Wren, and 2 footmen. Her expression was tender, prepared, almost eager beneath the softness. "My dear child," she said, reaching for Clara. "What did he do to you?" Clara rose from the floor. Her wedding gown was creased, her hair had fallen from its pins, and her face was pale from a sleepless night, but she stood without shaking. Behind her, Adrian stood too. Exhausted. Ashamed. Lady Mosseline's hand froze. Cedric stared past them, searching for blood, broken furniture, proof. The physician's eyes darted at once to the shattered glass and the dark stain on the rug. Clara saw him see it. And in that instant, she understood. The curse had help. Lady Mosseline recovered first. "Clara, you poor thing. You need not protect him. We all understand." Clara stepped forward, placing herself between the hallway and the man they had come to condemn. "No, my lady," she said, clear enough for every servant in the corridor to hear. "You do not understand at all." A murmur passed through the hall. Lady Mosseline's smile thinned. Clara lifted her chin. "His Grace did not harm me." For the first time in years, a bride had survived the. And she had not come out screaming. She had come out listening. By noon, every servant in Blackthorne Hall knew that Clara Whitmore had walked out of the Western Chamber alive. And by evening the old story of the cursed Duke had begun to crack. The maids whispered that she hadn't screamed once. The grooms swore the Duke had come downstairs pale and hollow-eyed but not wild. Even the footmen who had waited outside the locked door looked away whenever Clara passed. As if they had helped carry a lie and were only now beginning to feel its weight. Lady Mosseline smiled through all of it. That was what unsettled Clara most. Cedric's anger was easy to read. Dr. Haldon's nervous glances toward the western corridor were easier still. But Lady Mosseline remained gentle, sorrowful, and composed, as though the night had merely inconvenienced her rather than broken the first stone in a wall she had spent years building. After breakfast, she drew Clara aside near the conservatory windows. "My dear," Lady Mosseline said, touching Clara's sleeve. "You must be exhausted." "Naturally. Compassion does too." Her fingers tightened slightly. "Money. A safe place for you and your brother. You need only sign a statement saying His Grace frightened you and that you feared for your life. Clara looked at the elegant hand resting on her arm. His Grace did not harm me. Lady Mosseline's smile faded by one careful degree. You are loyal very quickly for a girl who was a maid yesterday. And you are afraid very quickly for a woman who claimed to pity him. For one breath, the mask cracked. There was no grief in Lady Mosseline's eyes then, only warning. You are playing a game you do not understand. Clara held her gaze. I understand enough to know who is afraid of the truth. Lady Mosseline stepped back and the softness returned to her face like a veil being lowered. Rest while you can, Clara. It sounded less like kindness than a deadline. Clara did not rest. Wren shut the linen room door the moment Clara entered. When Clara asked about the locked room and the medicine, the old housekeeper did not deny anything. I knew pieces, Mrs. Never enough to accuse. Never enough to protect him. Then tell me the pieces. Mrs. Wren folded her trembling hands in her lap. The fire began in the western wing when His Grace was 17. Duchess Elena was trapped beyond the old nursery. He tried to reach her, but the men pulled him out. After that, every storm brought the memory back. And the medicine. Dr. Halden prepares it. The brides were always taken to that chamber on storm nights, always after the draft. And always with the door locked from outside. Clara thought of the bitter stain on the rug and the physician's eyes moving to it before. He looked at Adrian. Mrs. Wren opened her hand. A small iron key lay in her palm. I took this from the western corridor cabinet before they counted the keys. It is not the only one, but it proves the door was meant to lock from outside. Clara took the key carefully. In her pocket, she already had a strip of cloth stained with the spilled medicine. It was not much, but lies often survived because no one gathered the small things they left behind. That night, Clara found Adrian in the library. He stood before an unlit hearth, staring into dead ashes as if even cold fire could accuse him. You should not be here, he said. I have been told that several times today. That does not make it less true. No, Clara said. But it does make it less interesting. He turned then, and despite everything, a flicker of surprise crossed his face. I frightened you, he said. Yes. Pain moved through his expression before he could hide it. Clara placed Mrs. Wren's key on the desk. Beside it, she laid the stained cloth. But you did not harm me. I could have. I have frightened every woman who came near me. Because someone arranged for them to meet your worst memory in the dark. His face changed. Clara told him what Mrs. Wren had revealed about the storm nights, the locked door, the medicine. And the council Lady Mosseline had summoned to decide whether he was fit to rule his own estate. Adrian listened without moving, but by the end, his hand gripped the back of a chair so tightly his knuckles had gone white. I will send you away before then, he said. That would help her. It would keep you safe. It would make me look guilty, silent, and bought. His jaw tightened. You do not understand what they will do to you in that room. I understand what they have done to you for 15 years. The words landed heavily. The nursery passage was full of smoke. My mother was behind the door. I heard her calling me. Every storm I hear her again. Every time I try to reach her. Every time I fail. Clara's throat tightened, but she did not pity him aloud. Pity would have wounded his pride, and he had already been wounded enough. You were not her murderer, she said. His mouth twisted. Try telling my dreams that. I intend to tell the council something else first. He looked at her then. And for the first time her name left his mouth not as guilt but as a plea. Clara. If I stand with you tomorrow, they will call me a liar, a servant pretending at loyalty. A maid who wore bridal silk and forgot her place. She looked at the key, the stained cloth, and the man everyone had called cursed because it was easier than asking who benefited from the curse. Let them. I know my place now. The council gathered the next evening in the great salon of Blackthorn Hall, beneath painted angels who looked down with pale indifferent faces. Elderly cousins sat along one wall. 2 magistrates stood near the hearth. Dr. Halden waited with his black medical case. Cedric leaned near his mother's chair, restless and hungry. Lady Mousseline sat in the center wearing mourning black, looking fragile enough to be believed by anyone who had never seen her smile in a locked room. Adrian stood alone at first. Then Clara entered. She wore no bridal gown this time. Ren had found her a plain blue dress, altered quickly but neatly. It did not make her look noble. It made her look awake, real, and unwilling to hide. Lady Mousseline's eyes narrowed. "My dear child," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "You need not be afraid. You are among people who wish to protect you." Clara walked to Adrian's side. "Then I am exactly where I should be. Beside him. After what you saw. Especially after what I saw." The room shifted. Lady Mousseline rose slowly. "Last night. This poor girl was locked in a chamber with my stepson and forced to witness the truth. We have all tried to conceal." She turned to Clara with practiced sorrow. "Tell them, my dear. Tell them how he raged. Tell them how you feared he would kill you." Clara waited until the room was silent. Then she said His Grace believed he was in the fire that killed his mother. A murmur moved through the salon. Lady Mousseline froze. "He struck the door," Clara continued. "He did not curse me. He called for Duchess Elena and begged to save her." Dr. Halden stepped forward quickly. "Trauma often takes violent forms. The girl cannot be expected to understand the danger she was in." "I understand danger very well, Doctor." Clara lifted the stained cloth. "I also understand the smell of a sleep draught made too strong." His face changed. Before he could answer, Mrs. Wren stepped forward and placed the iron key on the table. "The western chamber was locked from outside," she said. "As it was with the others." Lady Mousseline's voice cut sharp. "Mrs. Wren, you forget your place." "No, my lady," the old housekeeper replied. "I remembered it too late, but I remember it now." The magistrate picked up the key. Another examined the stained cloth. Cedric moved as if to snatch them back, but Adrian stepped in front of him. The room went still. For years, they had seen Adrian as a man barely holding back madness. Now they saw him holding back something far clearer. Authority. Clara faced the council. "No woman survived a night with the cursed Duke because no woman was meant to," she said. "The storm was chosen. The medicine was strengthened. The brides were frightened into becoming witnesses. And the monster you feared was created by the very people who wished to inherit from him." Cedric lunged for the table. Adrian caught him by the wrist before he could reach the evidence. Cedric struggled once, then stopped when he saw the Duke's face. "Do not," Adrian said. "Only 2 words. Dr. Halden broke first. He admitted the draft had been increased on Lady Mousseline's instruction, though he insisted it had only been meant to calm the Duke. Cedric shouted that the doctor lied. Lady Mousseline called Clara an ambitious servant with a talent for performance. But no one in the room looked at her the way they had before. By dawn, Lady Mousseline, Cedric, and Dr. Halden were removed from Blackthorn Hall to await formal inquiry. The council withdrew its petition before noon. Those who had arrived ready to bury Adrian's authority left speaking instead of a locked door, a stolen key, and the maid who had walked into a curse and found human hands behind it. But victory did not make Adrian whole in a day. A week later, he asked Clara to walk with him to the western chamber. The door stood open now. The heavy curtains had been removed. No medicine waited beside the bed. Evening light lay across the floorboards in a soft gold path. Adrian stood at the threshold for a long time. "I do not know how to be free of a thing I have carried for half my life," he said. "Then do not begin with freedom," Clara answered. "Begin with one honest night." He looked down at her. "And if the storm comes, then you will remember where you are. And if I do not, then I will remind you." His eyes searched hers, not for pity, not for worship, but for choice. "You do not have to stay," he said. "I can provide for Thomas. Give you money. A safe house. A life untouched by Blackthorn. Is that what you want?" His answer came slowly, as if honesty was still a new and painful language. "But for the first time, I want your choice more than my comfort." That was when Clara knew the curse had truly broken. She took his hand. "Then hear my choice," she said. I will stay tonight. Only tonight. Clara looked into the room where the window stood open and the last light touched the bed. That had once frightened every bride away. One honest night is enough to begin. Months passed before Blackthorn Hall stopped whispering, but new stories grew over the old ones. The villagers began to say the Duke walked in daylight. The servants said the western chamber smelled of lavender instead of medicine. Mrs. Wren said nothing at all. But she opened every curtain in that wing each morning with the satisfaction of a woman who had outlived a lie. Not as a maid hidden in the kitchen. Not as a bride used to prove a curse. As Duchess Blackthorn. On the first storm night of winter, thunder rolled over the moors with the same force that had once turned the house into a prison of memory. Clara woke to find Adrian sitting upright beside her, his breathing uneven. One hand gripping the blanket. She rose and placed his palm against the carved bedpost. What do you feel? She asked. Wood, he whispered. Cold or burning? Warm. Where are you? He opened his eyes slowly. For a moment, she saw the old terror pass behind them like a shadow crossing a field. But it did not stay. He looked at the open curtains, the steady fire, the unlocked door, and Clara beside him. Then he looked at her. Outside, the storm spent itself against the stones of Blackthorn Hall. But the house no longer seemed afraid of it. No bride had ever survived a night with the cursed Duke. But Clara Whitmore had entered the darkness, heard a man crying for his mother, and stayed long enough to understand the truth. The curse did not break because of magic bloodlines or ancient prayers. It broke because one woman listened when everyone else chose fear.